Hello there, and welcome back to part two of this amazing two-part episode sequence that we are doing with Josiah and Travis from Print On Demand cast. In the first episode, which was launched on Tuesday of this week, and if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and do listen to that one first, because in that episode we found out all about the print on demand industry and what it has to do with podcasting and how podcasters can use it to create merchandise for their podcast. In this episode, we are going to be continuing the conversation. We're going to be looking at the common mistakes in print on demand that Josiah and Travis commonly see. We're going to look at different types of print on demand products and services, and they are also going to be giving you their top tips for starting print on demand services for your podcast merch as well. So it's an amazing episode. It is a little bit longer than normal, but there was just so much goodness, I could not cut it down. So buckle in, grab a cup of tea, grab a notebook, and let's get going. I'd love to ask, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when they go into print on demand for merch?
Oh my goodness. We got episode after episode of those.
Yeah, I think one of the common mistakes that I see sometimes is just like wanting, because you can print on everything of any color, of every size, of every. I want pop sockets, I want beer koozies, I want t-shirts, and I want 14 colors of t-shirts, and I want hoodies, and they list out of the gate just like 50 to 60 items, and then the customer gets there and they're like, what the hell do I do here? I'm like, this is so confused. There's too much information coming at me at once. So I think that because you're excited, right? You want to start selling stuff. You're having all these ideas, and so, but less is more, especially when you're launching, and you don't want to show them all you got at the first launch. So if you have 30 ideas that you're going to want to produce, start with 10 and then do limited releases. Like the marketing part of that comes into play, to where they're not going to see everything you have to offer on the first visit. You're always going to be leaking more content. So that's a mistake that I see a lot, is people always just like overproduce and want to have 1,000 listings available to their followers. So Travis, what about you? What would be one that pops into your mind right away?
I mean, the first thing that always comes to mind, and I talk about this all the time, I'm kind of the organizational freak on our show, because I feel like the better organized you can be, the easier it is to eventually to continue to scale that in an organized way, to when you do have 100 or 500 products, you're not like searching for design files that because you started with the end in mind. And I see a lot of people that are just like, oh, I have this great design that I made on Canva and I'm going to put it on a shirt and we'll it'll sell, and then it sells, and you're like, where was that art? I need to upload it to a place, and oh gosh. And so starting with the end in mind, starting with that organizational structure that's going to serve you in the end. And then the other cool thing is that if this does take off, if you are doing well, it's so much easier to hand off to somebody, like a virtual assistant or somebody on your team that can help you, because it's organized, because it's very simple. There is a straightforward standard operating procedure to doing this thing, so that's a big one. I think the last one, well, Josiah might have another one, but I think your designs are super important. Yes, you can get away with text-based designs, but please don't use Arial or Comic Sans, or you know what I mean? So there are some fonts that are actually cool.
Yeah, Comic Sans literally means without humor. It's not funny. Just don't use it.
Just don't use it. Exactly. So your designs matter. So if you're not a designer, well, I'll say this. If you think you're a designer, have someone that love, and trust make sure that you are a designer. Like present those designs with open hands, right. Don't own your art so tightly that it's like you can't take any constructive feedback. And then see if other people actually like it. And if not, or you're not a designer in the first place, don't spend all your time trying to become a designer. Find somebody that can design. There's tons of people in this world that are excellent designers. And you could find a virtual assistant. I mean, that's what I've done pretty much my entire print on demand career. I've hired out my design. Every once in a while, I'll get a creative bug and I'll go in there and make something. But usually, 99% of our designs have been made by professionals, and so that's just, I think that's important enough to point out. It's not, you can have the coolest website, you can have the best SEO, you can have the greatest mock-ups, and all of the greatest descriptions. But if your designs stink, no one's going to buy them. So that's another mistake I see people make.
I think, wasn't there an influencer, I say recently, it was sometime last year, who had an absolutely massive Instagram following, and they released a t-shirt line or something and they couldn't sell any of it because I think it actually came back to your point that I mean, there was some talk about like audience engagement and stuff, but I think it came back to your point that actually just no one was interested in the actual product. It was just, I've got so many people following me, I'm sure that they will buy it, and actually it wasn't something that anyone even wanted.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too, I mean, to Travis's point, you want to build with what the end is in mind, but you also want to be able and have the ability to stay flexible. Don't marry yourself to like, this t-shirt is going to sell and this is the only design, or this is the thing. Be able to kind of shift when you find out maybe your audience aren't big t-shirt people, but maybe they love mugs, or maybe they want something different. So don't be married to a certain ideal going into it as far as what you will sell and what. Receive feedback. Don't be as creative people, podcasters, we're all creatives, right? I think we have the tendency to be a little bit too, for lack of a better term, too precious with our ideas, and we don't allow other people to give feedback in a constructive way, to Travis's point, and then we kind of implode and then nothing happens because you don't want anyone to touch it. But you have to be able to stay malleable and stay and pivot. This is a word we use a lot on the show. Pivot to something that is working as your journey continues.
And I know Josiah can speak to this, but you mentioned kind of this big influencer releasing something and nobody bought it. Well, a lot of times, you'll see, a big audience does not necessarily equal big sales. What the key is, and I think your podcasters should, you probably talk about this on the show, but engagement is so important, making them feel important. There is Josiah can speak to this, but they'll have an influencer on board. It'll be 100,000 people, and you're like, oh man, they're just going to sell a whole bunch of stuff, and then they don't sell anything. And then you have an influencer that has like 7,000 followers, and they blow up because they have established relationship with their audience and they've really spent time doing that. So if you are planning on going down this path, I think that's with anything though. I mean, if you're going to, you're going to build a course, you're going to do coaching, any of that stuff, you have to have the trust of your audience, for them to buy anything from you, for you to monetize any of this. So engagement is super, super important.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think, it's when I would look for influencers, because I made the mistake of having one guy that I thought was going to be like, my ship has sailed. He's probably like the first 5, or my ship's come in, and he was one of the first 5 people that I reached out to collaborate with. And I saw his following, and I was like, this is it. He said yes, and now we just sit back and watch the cash roll in. Obviously didn't happen, but because his engagement with his followers was non-existent. And then there was a guy on TikTok that had maybe 300,000 followers when I found him, and he blew up, and now he's got like 4 million followers. But his relationship with his audience was incredible. He would reply to comments. He would do a lot of lives. He would let them in behind the scenes. He would share his story. And at the end of the day, your goal is, as a content creator, you want the listener, you want your customer to be the hero of the story. You're not the hero of their story. You want to make them the hero of their story. So how can you, whether it's with a course, whether it's with merch, or just engaging with people, how can you position them to become the hero of their story? Because that's your primary goal as the content creator. And that's what really facilitates incredible loyalty above and beyond. I listen to your podcast once a week. It develops that, cult following for, as they say. And that's really the key to that. So if you're looking and you're wanting to start, if you are podcasting and you're wanting to start, doing the merch game, really be intentional about engaging for the sake of engaging, not selling a t-shirt. Don't comment and say, hey, that's awesome, hilarious, link in bio. Don't do that. Just be engaging and let them know that you care and that you're wanting to interact with them, and everything else will fall into place. But that's such a huge linchpin to the success of launching anything, to Travis's point, let alone merch.
Absolutely. I think that is such a key takeaway, I think, for just anything that you're doing in your podcast. Is it's about that community, isn't it? And I think quite often the word community, it gets used so much, but I think it's underestimated just how powerful community is. Like you said, particularly when you want to then shift into things like merchandise, courses, whatever it is. I would be really, really interested to know, because I know quite often people say merch and they immediately think t-shirts, jumpers, maybe possibly a hat, maybe a mug. What kinds of merch do you tend to see most being used that is not a t-shirt or a hoodie?
Well, I would say with go ahead, Josiah.
Yeah, go ahead. We're going to say the same thing. Coffee mugs.
Yeah. Because that's where we started. I started doing it in my basement, and then they started, and then they got a t-shirt printer, and then I got a t-shirt printer, and then, eventually I had a UV machine, I had embroidery, I had, all kinds of stuff, that we were doing, for print on demand. And, the processes are slightly different with different things. Laser engraving. Every single day, there are more and more print on demandable products, if that's a word. Well, I just made it a word.
Now.
So it is now. Like there's a company I know of that is selling USB speakers that you can laser engrave as print on demand. I mean, that would kind of be cool for a podcast. You know what I mean? To provide that for their listeners. That fits. So all I'll say is that if you can dream it, it might be out there. And if it's not out there, it might be out there in the next year or so, because I'm not kidding. Every single day, more and more products are becoming available. Now, whether or not, the pricing works for your particular demographic, that's a whole nother conversation. Right. But there is not a lack of unique print on demand items that you can put in your store and offer to your customers.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, mugs, hats obviously are my top priority because I'm a hat guy. But hats do really well. Even, it's also niche dependent. We've had folks do wooden signs before. I had a podcast that would create framed wooden signs with the cover art of their milestone episodes, and they would put it on their store, and then people would buy that cover art because it was the cover art for the episodes was really cool. It was like a niche kind of like 90s retro vibe, and really, really well done. So to Travis's point, it can be done. It's just figuring out what will sell and what works price point wise, and for you and for your customer base. And but yeah, there's no shortage of things that you can print in a on-demand fashion. So print on demandable.
Yep. Print on demand
makes me think of a jawbone. You want to print on my mandible? That's called a tattoo. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I love that. I'm really conscious of the fact that I say that now. I'm going to go and make that t-shirt. I'm going to get on Canva later and make that t-shirt.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So anyone who is listening to this and is now feeling incredibly inspired, they want to go and start some sort of print on demand for their merch, for their podcast, what would be each of yours number one tip for someone to take away into their POD journey, to start their print on demand journey?
Number one tip. Wow. I mean,
for anyone who's listening to the audio, by the way, these guys, like the concentration in their faces right now.
I mean, we have 180 episode of tips, so to pick one, that's no. But to be honest, like the one thing that I always drive home, and I even talked about it already, is that organization, and honestly, it's hard to know how to get organized in an industry that you know nothing about. So I think you need to. Shameless plug, come listen to our podcast and at least get an idea of what you're actually doing. Think through, some of that stuff. We have a episode, I think it's episode 10, that we talk about the organizational structure, because there's a difference between your mock-ups and your design files, your art files that you're actually going to put on the shirt or the mug or the wall art or whatever. And so keeping that organized, from the beginning can really benefit you. The other thing I would highly recommend, again, like I said earlier, is find out if it's going to be you doing the art or if you need to hire a VA, a virtual assistant, or somebody else. Maybe you have a kid that's really great at art and creating digital files, So, but you need to know how big that art needs to be, the dimensions, the DPI, dots per inch. You need to know what kind of art. Most of the time, we're using PNGs with transparent backgrounds. So you just kind of have to know a little bit of lingo, but you don't have to know a ton. And then finding out, I know you said one tip, but then figuring out where you're going to actually get these things produced. And I'll let Josiah take it from there.
No, I think that's obviously foundationally where you want to start. And like Travis said, I think episode 10, we talk about organization. We just did an episode on kind of like the order of operations or where you might be in your journey, either as a business owner, as a podcaster wanting to monetize. But the one thing we always tell people all the time when it comes to like what to do first is just to do, right? So if you're interested and you want to get things started, start that process. Start researching, start listening to the podcast. Another shameless plug. Reach out to Travis and I on Instagram, on our Facebook group. Reach out if you have questions, if you're wanting more information. Get the ball rolling, because one of the things that people always ask us is how can you guys comfortably do 180 episodes giving all these tips and tricks and tools and all the things that you've done to get success? How can you just give those away, right? Not behind a paywall. It's just free 99. You want all the tips you want. It's just at the Print On Demand cast, right? The reason is because the percentage of people who will actually take those tips and tricks and turn them into actionable steps is unfortunately super low. Because a lot of people get what I call information obese, right? They just accumulate so much info, but they don't exercise that info. And so they just stay stagnant. So my biggest thing is just get started, whether that is research stage, reaching out to us, whatever that looks like, just get started. And there's a community of people, Travis and myself primarily, that are here to help you connect those dots, learn that lingo, and get you onboarded to success when it comes to monetizing podcasting. Right
on the front page of our website, we have a series of 5 podcasts. It's like kind of Print On Demand 101, and it takes you through kind of some of that. That might be a good starting point, just to kind of, again, get that lingo, understand a little bit more about what we've talked about today. And then to Josiah's point, reach out to us. We love getting in conversations about Print On Demand. That's why we do a podcast. We like to talk, if you couldn't figure that out yet.
For 180 episodes minimum, which is brilliant. So if anyone didn't get that, they've got 180 episodes all about this stuff. You can really dive into it. And remind us, what's the podcast called and where is it available?
Yeah, so it's called the Print On Demand cast. So it's the POD cast. Still shocked that was available, but so glad we scooped it up. The Print On Demand cast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. So, Google, Spotify, Apple, those are the big 3. It's available there. You can go to printondemandcast.com to find out more information as well. You can go to printondemandcast.com/VIP and sign up for a weekly email that we'll send out with more tips and information than what we put in the show every week. And you get a bonus dad joke. We have dad jokes on our show every week.
So we roll.
prepare to groan and roll your eyes and probably laugh. We're very careful what jokes we allow on the show. There's lots that we haven't brought on, but we curate them very carefully. But yeah, that's where you can find the show. Social media wise, Instagram to Print On Deman Cast. Facebook is printondemancast.com/Facebook. printondemancast.com/Instagram is the quick way to get to all these platforms. So our website / Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and is TikTok. We have a TikTok. TikTok is there. So we have, a lot of content on those, lots of reels and clips and highlights and kind of other information that stem from the content. The Facebook is a group. It's a community of over 500 people. That if you have a question, join the group. Ask the group the questions. It's a good way to facilitate conversation between just Travis and I. Other people can chime in and give tips and advice and tricks and stuff like that. So yeah, and I'm sure we can send you all of this to put in show notes as well, so people aren't furiously trying to write these things while they're driving. Because I don't want to be responsible.
Don't do that. It will all be in the show notes below. Definitely, it will all be in the show notes, especially episode 10. I will find out exactly which episode it is. As well, for sure. And get that linked.
I'll also say, if you are out there and you want, I believe it's available in the States. So if you're in the US and you want a one-store solution for your podcast to start doing merch and design, you can DM us on Instagram and just say, hey, I heard you on Verity's podcast. I want that. I'm interested in that one-page store. I can reach out to you. We can schedule a call and kind of go from there. So that's Travis, anything else about where they can find us or why they would want to? We know why. Our
jokes are pretty great. But aside from that, I think just Print On Demand Cast. I think all the things you said, and just search Print On Demand Cast, and we'll come up in all the things.
Yeah. Yep.
I love that. It's amazing, and I also love that you're saying as well. Get in contact with you if you want to know where to start first. Get in contact with you guys, but we're definitely going to get the podcast and all those links in the show notes. 180 episodes. That is like, almost like a university degree worth of information right there that you can just get started on and just learn so much. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on this episode. It has been so much fun. I've learned a lot. Hope you guys have enjoyed yourself as well. And I know that our audience are going to have learned a lot from this episode as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm glad we were able to line this all up with you being across the ocean and us being here in Colorado. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So thank you for the invite.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Hey, wait, don't go just yet. If you are still waiting to hit that 1,000 download milestone and beyond, remember the Lazy Pod Club is where podcast dreams come to life. Visit veritysongcon.com/membership, and I cannot wait to see you on the inside.